Well, this is it. We're down to the final week of the 2020 regular season. It's been a wild ride, and I really can't believe how fast it went by. Time really does fly when you're having fun. For some teams, this is going to be a huge week, and for others, it'll mean absolutely nothing since they have nothing to play for. How is that going to translate into this week's results? We'll find out soon enough. The meta will likely be the same as last week, given that we are still using the same exact hero pool, so lots of dive and some double shield. Speaking of last week, let's quickly discuss my thoughts on the 3 key matches that I highlighted from it. So the first one was Dallas versus Vancouver, and this was a lot more one-sided than I expected it to be. I was not ready for the field to smash the Titans like that. It looks like they really want to end their season strong. The next one was the Fusion and the Shock, and I'm pleasantly surprised with how badly Philly proved me wrong. They didn't just show me they have what it takes to be number 1, but they also further proved just how big of a superstar X-Factor Carpe is. He made all the difference in that series, and there's no debating it. The final key match was the Valiant and the Florida Mayhem. My team once again proved me wrong for doubting them, as KSP with a Mercy Pocket proved to be busted. Another thing I'd like to add with this game is that Florida seems to have a big problem with taking down foes who show resistance. When a game gets tough, they always seem to tucker out for some reason. They run out of gas and just lay down defeated. Their mental is something they have to improve upon heading into the playoffs. No ifs, ands, or buts. But that pretty much rounds up my thoughts on those games, so now let's look at the present. And it all starts on Friday afternoon when the Vancouver Titans look to take down the Boston Uprising. So this is it for Boston. This is their last game of the regular season. They may already be locked into the 13 seed, but they still probably want to end their horrible regular season on a good note so they feel a bit better about themselves heading into the playoffs. But the question is, can they do it? If last week was any indicator, then things don't look very good. This meta requires a lot of coordination, and that is something they simply don't have enough of. Their chances of success definitely go up since they're playing someone substantially worse than the Gladiators, but Vancouver still did manage to get a win last week, unlike them. And they didn't just win. They 3-1'd Atlanta, who are usually pretty good with beating the teams below them in the standings. Atlanta were off their game for sure, but it's not like they weren't trying, you know? They still do have something to play for. The 5 seed in North America is up for grabs. So between Vancouver looking good and Boston's shortcomings, this feels like a Vancouver favored match. I see them taking it 3-1. Generally speaking, this meta plays more up to their comfort zone. Shockwave and Dalton make a nice 1-2 punch with the Sombra Widow or the Sombra Ashe in particular. Jerry and Color Hex are at the disadvantage, and even though I like the Boston support line more thanks to Myungbong in the game, the Vancouver support seem to have a better understanding of how to properly play in this meta. The one place I think Boston are even at is tank. Unless the rest of Boston suddenly flip the switch, this should be a win for the Titans unless Punk and Fusion seriously carry. The other Friday game is shaping up to be pretty interesting. The Florida Mayhem versus the LA Gladiators. This is going to be key match number 1. This match is absolutely huge for the Glads. They cannot afford to drop any games this weekend, otherwise I believe they won't be able to get the 5 seed anymore. Everything is on the line for them. Meanwhile, Florida are locked in. Their seeding is not going to change. They don't really need to focus on this week if they don't want to. They could totally just throw and look more towards the playoffs. That's the big what if in this game. Are Florida going to try and end the season on a positive note, or are they not going to care? I see it like this. If they seriously prepare, then they have a good chance of winning, as the Glads can't really beat good competition. However, if they don't care all that much, then I'm expecting them to lose. It's hard to judge with these types of things, but I'm assuming Florida tries at least a little bit. My gut feeling tells me they don't want to end the season this way. But you know, even if Florida does try, there still is room for upset potential here. The Glads have a lot of good stuff going on for them this meta. You've got OG on the Winston and Bird Ring getting pocketed. You can tell by watching them in this meta that they really like to play it. And that could mean a recipe for success since they are in a do or die situation. They have to win this game to keep pace with the Reign and Valiant. It's now or never. But the thing is, the Mayhem can be quite good here as well. Winston has always been a comfort pick for somebody like Fate, and BQB has been insane all year. I honestly think this game comes down to the DPS. BQB versus Bird Ring is big, but so is the Sombra matchup. Yaki showed me that he can play a decent Sombra, but I don't know if he has what it takes to outplay the Glad's DPS in this situation. The Glads might have a potential advantage if they can execute the way they plan to, but knowing the Gladiators, something is going to go wrong somehow and it's going to fall apart. And that is why I think I'm going to pick the Mayhem to win 3-1. This is a game I'm very unsure of though, I will say that. Between the serious upset potential and the Glads having so much to play for, I can totally see this game going the other way. It's going to be a good one. Now we can talk about some APAC action, and first up is another key match, the Seoul Dynasty versus the Hangzhou Spark. These two are literally neck and neck in the standings currently. The winner of this more than likely decides who gets the 4 seed in the APAC playoffs, I believe, so needless to say, this is pretty big. All I know heading into this matchup though is that the Spark could be in for a tough game. I can't say with confidence how they're going to play since they did have last week off, and Seoul are kind of on a hot streak right now. They played 3 games and didn't drop a single map last week, and in this current meta, they get to play heavily around Profit, which they always benefit from. But it's not just Profit. A new playmaker has come to the surface as well. Tuyu has been a monster since he joined the league. He's leaving some really good early impressions on me. He has the consistency that Marvel and Michelle could not produce. This week is going to be a real test for him though. He gets another crack at QOQ, and this time it's in a non-Zarya meta. If Seoul want to come out on top, then he needs to come up big. The other thing I'll be looking at is Profit versus Godsby. Profit didn't really get contested much with London or New York, so this is going to be the true test. He's playing against a solid hitscan who has a lot better help. If Profit owns or at least keeps up, then I think the Dynasty win this game. While I do think this game could go either way, I feel like it's too risky to pick Hangzhou. I've got the Dynasty winning 3-2. I don't know how coordinated the Spark are going to be in this meta. Could Gushue and QOQ show good enough synergy in a Winston Diva meta? I just don't know. I have concerns about that. And how about Sombra? Who are they going to play there? They need Gansby on the snipers, but he's also their best Sombra player at the same time. Could I really trust Architect or Adora to play a good enough Sombra? I just don't know. The Dynasty feel like a safer bet. Heading into match number 4, the NYXL will play the London Spitfire, and this is yet another one of those weird games. Neither team has anything to play for whatsoever, like it's completely meaningless, as both teams are already locked into 3rd and 7th place in the APAC region respectively. London missed out on the chance to pass Chengdu last week, so they're stuck now, and as a result, both teams probably won't prepare or try all that much here. Both teams probably will end up continuing to mess around with their lineups and just do whatever they want. Neither team looked pretty last week, but I think London have looked lost for a long time now because nothing seems to be clicking these days. It's like I said with the London versus Seoul matchups last week. Even though the NYXL aren't in great shape either, they still have the basic understanding of teamwork down. They have way better fundamentals. Between the more versatile roster and the stronger teamwork, I'm expecting New York to win 3-1. I think they might drop a map or two just because they're not trying, but even though New York is not playing at their best, they probably still will beat London no matter what. Next up is the San Francisco Shock versus the Washington Justice. Simply because we probably get to see Decay, I want to consider this a key match just to see how his efforts do affect the Justice. Oh, and as a side note, I apologize for saying Washington were done until the playoffs the other week. Somehow I completely forgot about this game. I must have turned my brain off or something. But anyway, I'm intrigued to watch Decay play on his new team, and getting a potential Arc Mercy Pocket in his debut sounds like a pretty good thing to me. But unfortunately, no matter how hard Decay carries, the Justice are probably not going to win. It's a team difference at the end of the day. If Decay always fell short against San Fran on Dallas, then how could he do any better on the Justice? I'm sorry, but that's the truth. The Shock take it 3-0. The Justice do not have as good of a team. Decay is definitely going to improve that team, but they still have a lot of weak links that hold them back. And you can't really afford to have any weak links against a team like the Shock. Next is the Dallas Fuel versus the Toronto Defiant. Now normally, I would argue this game looks pretty solid on paper, but recently the Toronto coaching came out and said they simply aren't preparing much for the present currently. They're looking more towards the playoffs and what the meta could have in store for us then. With how Dallas played last week, I would argue they seem to care a bit more about ending the season strong. I want to say more about this game and hype it up in whatever way I can, but there's not much else to say. I think the Fuel probably just win pretty easily 3-1. Toronto are kind of throwing because they have their eye on the prize. If they're openly coming out and saying they are barely practicing on this patch, then Dallas pretty much feels like a shoo-in to win. If a coach of Toronto is telling the fans not to get their hopes up, then the game kind of feels like it's over before it even began. They're stuck where they are currently. They don't have anything to play for, and I get the feeling Dallas just care a bit more because they want to end the season for their fans in a really good way, so they're pretty happy heading into the playoffs. Now for another NA playoff race key match. Gladiators versus Atlanta. The dynamic of these two is so interesting. They've both had the same kind of disappointing and mediocre year, but now these two have a chance to start their march to glory. It's so important for both of them to get a win. It could be the difference between finishing in 5th and finishing in 7th in the NA standings. There are some really cool matchups to look forward to. Iris versus Shaz, Big Goose versus Masa, Birdring versus Edison. From the pure entertainment perspective, there's a lot to look forward to. But when keeping the meta in mind, it does not appear all that even. Since Dive has been played more and more as of late, the Atlanta Reign face an immediate disadvantage. Atlanta's Dive has been subpar for the most part. They seriously only look comfortable on the Orisa Sigma, and they've played it a lot more than they should have in my opinion. If the Reign try to play more double shield, then I fear the Glads might start running circles around them. This is a better meta for the Gladiators overall. OG gets to be more in his wheelhouse while also not affecting the play of his teammates. This is more than ideal for them. That dive advantage makes me think they come out on top in a 3-1 victory. Atlanta's only chance of pulling this off is if they can get back in the zone like they did against Paris. But at this point, they kind of feel boomed. They came so close to defeating the Eternal, but they took it the hard way instead of looking at the positives. They couldn't even beat Vancouver, so how should I expect them to beat the Gladiators? It just doesn't make any sense. To finish up Saturday, the Valiant take on the Titans. I've already made the narrative clear. This weekend is of grave importance to the Valiant. A win gets them one step closer to their goal. A 5th place finish is within reach. They currently own the spot, so a win would pretty much get them where they need to be. A loss is simply unacceptable for them in this situation. But I don't think the Titans are going to make this easy. I'm of the belief they're going to go all out. As a young team at the bottom of the standings, playing spoiler for a second week in a row would feel amazing. The Titans have some rhythm going for themselves right now. If they play around their DPS like they've been doing, then this could be interesting. But it's not like in the Boston game, unfortunately. They don't hold a ton of advantages. They're on the opposite side of the spectrum this time. The Valiant are the ones with the better coordination in the roster for this meta. So guys like Rolf, Karkar, and Shredlock have to up their game. I need to see more of what they showed me against Atlanta, or the Titans are going to get consumed. The Valiants control their own destiny, and I think they plan on keeping it that way. It may be a bit scrappy at times, but I do see them maintaining control in a 3-1 victory. The Valiant have better teamwork than somebody like Atlanta. I firmly believe that, and that teamwork is going to overcome Vancouver's individual playmakers. But even so, I will be looking at the DPS battle for sure. KSP and Shockwave are both coming off fantastic weeks. I'm curious to see who comes out with the hot hand to start. My gut feeling says KSP has the slight edge because his team will make a better space for him, but you never know. And now we are on to the final day, where it starts with the Seoul Dynasty versus the London Spitfire for what feels like the millionth time already. I'm already pretty tired of watching and talking about this matchup, so let's make it quick. If we simply go off what happened last week, we can say for certain that the Dynasty have a greater understanding of the meta. I mean, that goes without saying at this point. Seoul were practically running circles around them last week. London don't seem to have the awareness. With how badly Gesture was dominating the backline and how much Profit was getting away with literally everything, there are some clear-cut miscommunication and synergy issues that leave certain players on an island to die by themselves. It happened so many times last weekend. In all honesty, London is probably going to think about the playoffs at this point. It really isn't worth their time to prepare for this. This has to be Dynasty favored 100%. Seoul take the sweep yet again and continue their hot streak. I think Seoul is going to take this week very seriously. They've had zero consistency all season up until now. They probably want to keep that momentum rolling so they feel content with where their level of play is heading into the tournament. The Dynasty have a serious chance to turn this around, and they need every piece of positivity they can get. Now for another potential snoozer. The Dallas Fuel versus the Paris Eternal. No matter what kind of look these two show, I'm kind of preparing for a lackluster game. That's what my gut feeling is telling me. If you can recall, the last time these two played, it was completely one-sided. And keep in mind that Paris were without Exy and Sparkle. With their two biggest playmakers missing in action, they still crushed the Dallas Fuel. So even if the Eternal decided to field their B team or whatever you want to call it, that would still probably beat out Dallas. What can Dallas Dallas hope to accomplish if Paris can still beat them when they aren't at full strength? I understand the times have changed, but Paris are still noticeably better, and don't forget the Fuel don't have Decay this time to help them. I have the Eternal taking it 3-1. In my opinion, Paris are a team that are still better even if they're not going all out. This is going to be really tough for the Fuel. The only chance I give Dallas is if Nico were to play Sombra, let's say. Doha could seriously abuse that matchup if it presents itself, but even that may not be enough. Paris have so many matchup advantages. Their tanks are better with double shield and dive alike, and I will take Soon and Exi over Onigod on high ping any day. I mean, who wouldn't? He's at a disadvantage. And don't even get me started on the supports. The difference is night and day. Moving onwards, the San Francisco Shock play the Atlanta Reign. I kind of feel bad for Atlanta. In a crucial weekend for their playoff seeding, they have to run into the San Francisco Shock of all teams. And this isn't the standard San Fran you're dealing with. You have to play a super pissed off San Francisco team. Losses always get under their skin and they usually come back stronger than before. That's how history tends to play out these days. It happened after they lost to both LA teams and when Paris took them down in the Summer Showdown. When the Shock lose, they respond with a dominant win streak like every time. They've already claimed one victim. Atlanta's the next one on the chopping block. The Shock aren't one of those teams who takes their foot off the gas either. In 2019, they played hard right until the very end of Stage 4. They wanted the Valiant to suffer, and I'm sure they wouldn't mind doing the same for the Reign because of the history that presents itself with these two. The Shock are cold-blooded. They thrive off of this kind of stuff. It only makes them stronger. And again, the Reign are historically bad against good teams this year. I still have no reason to believe that is going to change. In a predominant double shield meta, they might have stood a chance, but even then probably not. But now it's more about dive, which Atlanta are not great with. And like with Double Shield, the Shock also happen to be world class on dive. Smurf and Anson are probably going to have a field day. Shock take the sweep. It does not look good if you're the Atlanta Reign here. Playing San Francisco is bad enough on its own, but now you've got to play them when you're not at your best. I do not like what I saw from them in that Vancouver game, and I'm very worried about them. I didn't have that much confidence in them to begin with, so this is just going to be a complete L. To conclude the final week of the 2020 regular season, we get the Battle for LA Part 2. What a fitting game to end the year. Good on the creators of the schedule for this one. Not gonna lie, I am pretty hyped. This is a key match that everybody should be tuning in for. If you simply go off their previous matchup, these two seem pretty evenly matched. They are right at the same skill level, and both sides clearly take this rivalry seriously. And depending on the outcomes of some of the other games this week, we might end up having the 5 seed be decided by this game. Between the pride and all that's on the line, this game is shaping up to be huge, and I don't know if anyone has the obvious advantage, because I think both teams cancel each other out in a lot of different places. The DPS are very close in particular. KSP and Birdring both have extremely high peaks. I'm expecting those two to go back and forth all night. For the supports, the same does kind of apply for me. I think the Glads might come out on top with tanks though. Space is a better off tank than McGravy, and OG has a higher peak than Dreamer. If there was ever a place for the Glads to press the advantage, this would be it. But the thing is, the Valiant this year have proved to me that they're good at beating out their disadvantages sometimes. When KSP is on his game, anything is possible. And this happens to be a solid meta for the Valiant tanks, by the way. Dreamer and McGravy are their best on Winston and D.Va in my opinion. And I mean, we've seen them take down superior tank lines before. I mean, they literally just did it last week against Florida, because I would say most people would agree with me that Fate and Gargoyle are a better tank line, right? But in the second half of that game, they made the necessary adjustments to counter them. I think the Valiant have just as good of a chance to win this game. The Valiant have the higher peaks and are proven to be better in the clutch, but the Glads do feel new and improved to me. They didn't beat anyone special last week, but they still did get a 3-0 twice in a row. They seem very focused, and they usually play the Valiant pretty tough. It's pretty much a coin flip, but I had the Valiant winning the Battle of LA in a 5-map showdown. What I think gives the Valiant the slight edge is their coaching and overall resilience. Packing 10 is much better at making those on-the-fly adjustments that often become game changers. D-Pain, the Glads tend to get thrown off when things don't go their way. They usually have a hard time bouncing back. They simply just get rolled. And that's what ultimately makes me think they lose this game. The Valiant's superior adaptability will give them their first win in the Battle of LA in over a year. But again, I would not be surprised if this game goes the other way. I think anything is possible in this type of crazy rivalry. But with the Glads not really beating anyone special last week and the Valiant beating the Mayhem again for a second time this year, that makes me think they have a better resume heading into this match. They've proven to be able to do more against better opponents. And with that said, That is the end of my regular season predictions for this year. I successfully stayed committed to this series every week for the entire season. You guys really seem to enjoy it, so I wanted to do everything in my power to keep it around consistently. So thank you guys for that. Thank you so much for keeping me motivated with your positive response to this series. And don't worry, I'll probably do something similar for the playoffs, so this is not the end of predictions for the rest of the year or anything like that. Weekly Preds have become a staple here on the channel, so I wouldn't even dream of dropping them suddenly. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you guys did, then it would mean a lot to me if you could like, comment, and subscribe. And feel free to hit that join button and follow my socials down in the description if you wish to further support me. And as always, thanks so much for watching. I really do appreciate your support. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.